Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted to have a conversation with Alix Willemez. Alix, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fritz. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think about the poor listener who will have a compilation of European accent today, French
Yes.
and Dutch.
Yeah. We're going to explore your background, and to help the audience a little bit, I'm just going to highlight a couple of things which I picked up in preparing the interview. A topic dear to my heart. You help organizations translate complex science and policy into clear narratives to drive decision impact. That's your background. You're also an expert World Ocean Assessment, a UN body, a member of the World Commission on Environmental Law, founder of MAM Africa, lecturer, and the list goes on and on. But also what surprised me is you're educated both in Cambridge and Sorbonne with a PhD in philosophy. And then when I looked closer, you actually listed 14 courses.
Maybe even more, but I removed 70% of them.
Wow.
From LinkedIn.
Definitely a topic. But also, I'm going to finish what is exactly immediately at the beginning of your profile, a plane crash survivor. Not many can list that as, basically, it's the line where you put an achievement. So, but what is an achievement in this case?
Yes.
Okay, and finally, and actually, the background already alludes that a little bit. You are in Tunisia at the moment. I see a little bit of a Tunisian background with you looking at the window. So again, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Yes, you listed so many things.
Yes.
I don't know where to start anymore.
Yeah. I'm going to attack the elephant in the room, and then I'll move on to education. But the very first thing you come across when I look you up is plane crash survivor. When and what happened?
So it was August 2005, and I was taking 30 kids to Canada on an exchange program. And I prepared them ahead, and then on the day we left, there were lots of storms around Toronto where we were supposed to land. And there were also different storms in the regional airports, so Ottawa and Niagara. So it was very difficult for the pilot to know where to land. And at the time, the procedures were not as tough as they are today. And they were really left to the discretion of the pilots, who actually were really overwhelmed by all the difficulties we were encountering. So our plane got hit by lightning during the storm. Then the control tower did not respond anymore because it was itself hit by lightning. There was the anemometer that tells you the wind speed that was no longer responsive on the tarmac. So and the big runway was closed, and our plane was a really huge one. So it was very difficult for the pilot to know what to do. And because they did not have so many strict procedure, their brain had to think about everything all the new information they gathered. So they ended up landing on a small runway that was not meant for big planes like that need a longer time to reduce their speed. And the runway was unfortunately covered with water. And at that time, and on that specific airport, there is no special protection on the tarmac, and so it did not absorb as much water as it had should. So the plane left the tarmac because it needed more time actually to reduce its speed, and it fell in a cliff. In a hole. There was a hole behind, and it really crashed. Like you can see it like bumping as it started exploding. There was a fire was starting, and some parts of the plane exploded on the big runway that surrounds Toronto. At that time on the plane, it was really, really scary. Everything went black. People were starting screaming. So I had my 30 kids. So my whole attention was focused on my kids, to be honest. Then there were actually more stewards than expected, because 3 were coming back from another mission. So they were not supposed to work that day, but they did an amazing job, because half of the slides did not open because of the violence of the crash. And they escaped the whole 360 passengers, all with two security doors. So they did a really amazing job, especially because there were a lot of people who were extremely stressed, and some tried to get their backpacks and blocked the way while the plane was on fire and everybody was screaming. So they really did an awesome job. So we used a slide, left the plane running because it was so it was stormy, it was cold, it was rainy, and we ended up running. I was barefoot. I lost my shoes during the crash because it was so violent, and we were running, trying to escape out of the hole, the thing, and kids were put in everybody's car, basically the cars that were on the runway. Some people just were so scared of the explosion they just entered any car. We ended up in a food truck, really dark, and everybody was scared. And finally, we got some buses from the airport caught us, and then we were brought back to the airport. But to be honest, they had no idea what to do with us, and I think this lasted for so long. So I was stuck in a bus. For me, the worst part was being stuck in a bus, soaked, with people crying, and with all the journalists calling. And my only concern was to get out of this bus, to be able to count my 30 kids, and nobody would allow me to leave the bus. And I had the parents calling me and say, "Where is my kids?" And I had no answer to that.
Yeah.
So for me, that was the most terrifying thing. And then I had a special phone at the time. I'm very old. It's called like 4 bands, like you buy on purpose when you go far away so that it works. It didn't work.
Yeah.
So I tried to call my mom, didn't work. And so I was like, level of stress here, trying to answer as a parent, like, "I'm really sorry, I don't know where your kid is. I'm really trying to find him." And then somebody just hangs me a phone like this, and it's my mom. And I'm like, "Mom, why are you calling? Like, I'm busy. I have so many things to do." And I hang up on her, and she told me that was enough, because on TV,
you were living.
On TV, there was pictures of the plane on fire, and it was written, "No news from the survivors."
Yeah.
So she was just happy she talked to me.
So that's, I mean, we talk about milestones in people's life. Is it a milestone? Is there a before and after for you?
It is a milestone because so I realized first it was on the anniversary of my father's death. So all of this psychologically was, well, a lot, and then I was really like trying hard on studies I didn't like. And then I was like, that's enough. Like I need to take some time off. And so I was awarded a free ticket, a compensation ticket, and I wanted to go to Kyrgyzstan, but my mom said no because there were lots of kidnappings at that time. And she was like, "I don't want to go through another stress." So I said, "Okay, I'm going to Mongolia." And she was like, "Yeah, fine." I went there for 15 days. And then I called my mom and I said, "I'm staying."
Yeah. So
and that helped me. That helped me rebuild and find like another reality,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what's for you the big lesson learned from that milestone you take with you in your work, the rest of your life, your work?
It's something I'm going to make a tech talk about in 2 weeks. It's how we, human and also nature, we survive chaos.
Yeah.
Basically, chaos is really scary for us when we lose our jobs, which is happening to many people at the moment, or when we have somebody getting sick in our family, or when somebody dies. We really think like we hit the bottom of the pool, and that's it. But I realized it's actually more than that. It's a way for you to transform, to get clearer on what you want, clearer on what you need to be strong, and then it's actually, yes, a new start.
Yeah.
And and I take
Okay.
the picture of the Big Bang. Big
Good.
Bang is uttermost chaos,
Yeah.
but look at all the beautiful things that emerge from that.
Okay. Yeah. I got that. Good. So we might want to revisit it later, because not that many people have experienced this, so it's a lot to learn, and I think people are curious about, hey, what does this mean? But I also want to move on, given we only have so short time to talk. Um, you are highly educated. Just looking at the sheer number of courses, but also ending with a PhD in philosophy. What drives you to follow and absorb so much knowledge in education?
Okay, first, I don't really like school. Sounds a bit stupid, but I don't like school, but I love learning,
Yeah.
and I'm interested in so many things. And so I try most of the time when I do another master, I'm gonna do another degree soon in Harvard, and so I'm every time I actually try to unite things that I've
Yeah.
already learned, but that actually piles up, and it's not really as clear as it should be. But there are so many links to so many subjects, and I regret that most of the time it's taught in silos. So you learn economy, you learn law. So my PhD was on environmental law, how we protect the ocean while trying to extract minerals and energy resources from it.
Mhm.
So and so we speak in silos. And my biggest success, for example, for my
Yeah.
PhD, was that the one of the professor who assessed me came to me afterwards, and she said, your topic started in a really strange way. You started your law PhD speaking about demographics, and I found it really weird, and I almost like closed it and
Yeah.
left it. And after reading, she said like it made her want to go to speak to her economics colleagues. And I was like, then I that's it.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
You want to get out of the silos and bring all the knowledge together in one clear uh, image so that everybody understands it. And I write books that are very hard to market. And I understand why so many publishers are a bit like reluctant when they read them. But I write book, for example, on energy, money, or time, where I bring all the knowledge
Yeah.
from different sectors, and I put them together to give one clear view. And that's why I always need more education, because I need a
Okay.
clearer view.
Got that. But I also recognize something in my own experience where I have a background both in business process management and in alliance management. And I once linked two professors to each other, both in their respective topics. And they were very much focused on what they sets us apart. They were like exploring the differences and not what they had in common,
Mhm.
which I found quite strange because if you organize a business process or if you organize an alliance, it's both connecting people on a non-hierarchical level. And that got me on a tangent thinking of realize, hey, this world is much more connected than we realize. Why are we focused on what sets us apart and not what brings us together? So I
That's so
recognize what
true.
you're seeing there.
And
Um,
use each other's diversity, knowledge, and strengths. We
yeah,
need that.
yeah. Now, I forgot, to be honest, I forgot who came with the quote, the more you know, the more you realize what you don't know.
You exactly.
So you could say gaining so much knowledge in that respect um, uh, provide us some kind of frustration, or how do you deal with the fact that uh, you educate yourself and realize it's never going to be enough.
Then I keep buying more books and I keep listening to more podcasts like yours. And yeah, and I'm never bored. So
Yeah.
it's great, isn't it?
Okay. Yeah. So tell us, because I mentioned the beginning, expert world ocean assessment. A, what is it? And B, how did you get there?
So in a very strange way, I guess. But um, let me tell the story backwards. I
Yeah.
had just given birth to my first daughter, Joyce, and 2 months later, I received an email. And mommy brain is really like you don't understand anything what's going on
Yeah.
in your world. And so I received this email from the UN saying, please send us your passport and bank details. And I'm like, whoever wants my passport and bank details, I give them. Like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then I did this, and then I went back to my baby. And then, like another week later, I receive please join us for the World Ocean Assessment in Palau, which is, if you're a diver like
Yeah.
me,
Palau.
is
Yes. Nice.
it's a mecca of diving. And then I was like, oh wow, this is something I applied for a long time ago
Okay.
to serve as an expert, and I was like really excited. And my husband was really supportive and said like, go. So I've been to Palau. I had the chance to meet lots of different and very very bright professors of oceanography or anything related to the ocean, and we gather to try and give a clear view of a clear picture
Mhm.
of what is the ocean facing and what are the threats we can work on. So because it's a blue planet, like people really don't realize it's really like ocean
Yeah.
with some bits of land. Your map behind you is a bit
It's a blue map. Yes. Yeah.
it's not as blue as it really is. It's really more blue. Like if you
Okay.
turn around and just see the Pacific from the moon,
Yeah. It's
you
blue.
just see
Yeah.
blue.
Okay.
As
I'm going to
yeah.
stop you there because I think you're missing a step because we just mentioned, okay, you do a PhD in philosophy, and all of a sudden
It's,
you are asked to be as an expert in world ocean assessment. So,
no, my PhD was
oh,
it was on environmental law and on ocean.
okay, okay.
So
Uh,
it was how the law can be used to extract marine energy and mineral resources
got it.
without harming too much. But one of the big topic I worked on, which at that time, so 10 years ago, was uh, really emerging,
Mhm.
was deep sea mining. And at that time, everybody was pushing for deep sea mining. So basically extracting minerals from the bottom of like the deep
Yeah.
ocean,
Mhm.
to put in our phones and all computers. So what is called critical materials. And so one of the aspects of my PhD was saying, because everybody was like pushing, like we really need to have a legal framework to
Mhm.
make sure that some countries don't come and extract all of it on their own and just leave the sea devastated. Or for example, in you have Australia and Vanuatu, Oceania behind you. It's a very important region for biodiversity, so it's very important to protect it and not leave those states, those small island developing states, alone when it comes to fighting to those big companies who come and just take the minerals and destroy everything. So at that time, I was really cautious and tried to make sure we have special rules. And now, thank God, 10 years later, the public participation, the scientists, the NGOs did such an awesome work that everybody is backing up. Like we all say, now we need a moratorium on deep sea mining. We don't know. We really need to be precautious about this because we don't know the amount of species that are under in the deep ocean. Like every day, scientists discover hundreds of species, and it's we go to the moon, we go to Mars, but we don't know our own planets. 70% of it is water. We don't know it. So we need to be extremely careful. And now, thank God, due to this massive public activity, we are backing up. So
But is it universally backed? Because I can imagine if people realize the treasure trove under the sea, that some people with less scruples say, well, I'm still going to excavate that because I need that.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
what's
But
happening?
we are trying to put more rules in place,
Yeah.
and at the moment the technology is not there yet, and some big companies have they've bankrupted because so there is no traction and a lot of public pressure to stop before we start. So yes, we're slowing down, and it's a very good thing because we don't know. We need to know before we do whatever.
Okay. And is that also part of what I mentioned at the beginning? You help translate complex science into something people understand and make decisions on about?
Yeah, so because so I told you I have a lot of knowledge on different subjects, like a master in international relation, one in sustainability leadership, the PhD in ocean. Then I have something coming up on uh, uh, positive change for the good. So my idea is really I have so much knowledge in my brain, and there are so many different so many different things I know. For example, I worked for the past 6 years in climate finance, so I know how to get the money, put it on a project to protect the environment. So it's very important for organization to translate scientific insight into actionable, implementable projects that actually work and are sustainable. Because most of the time, some projects they have the knowledge, they have the technology, and it doesn't work for many different reasons. Like so, it is, for example, it's not adapted to the region where it's supposed to be created, or they don't get the finance because they don't know how to speak to financiers, and all of this is very difficult. So I try to bring this together to make sure that the projects really have an impact on the
Okay.
ground.
Yeah. And what can you take us along? I mean, translating complex science. Um, who do you translate it for? So who should listen and read this?
So
First of all,
it's mostly global organizations who
okay.
have like big projects. I work so for the UN, the climate funds, for European Commission, and for some big companies or climate research, because they want to have such. Often they have a lot of money,
Yeah.
and they want to have an impact on the ground. But the problem is there is so many conflicting knowledge, and that they don't know how to put it together and make an impactful project. So here is where I come. I understand how scientists speak, even though I'm not a scientist
Yeah.
myself, but I've worked so
Mm,
long in renewable energy projects with engineers or with oceanographers. I understand when they speak.
mhm.
Uh, Sometimes it takes a little bit of time because they use a lot of jargon,
Yeah. Yeah.
and but most of the time I understand what they mean,
Yeah.
and then I know how to translate it into legal policy finance
Okay. Yeah.
language
Okay. So it's a translation to specific other domains.
silos.
So
Yeah,
to other silos, okay.
yeah.
So it's not necessary because that was the assumption I was making. It's not like, okay, we need to simplify it for a general public. It needs to be translated to another expert domain.
Yes,
Yeah.
and but for the simplification, it's the topic of my books, the
Yeah.
one that are.
Okay.
So I have a book about energy where I really like simplify the whole story,
Yeah.
and basically the message is the way we're using energy is really weird,
Yeah.
and it's
But
not optimized.
yeah. But my experience in having dealt with scientists and academics in the background is this, the minute you start to simplify things, you get a very big pushback because, oh, then
Few missing points.
you're missing points. So what's the take on that? How do you then tell people, well, sorry, this is the way we should simplify it?
So two things different for when I work with global organizations. I don't try to simplify. I try to translate it so they understand what's in it for them. Uh, and I remove the jargon. I put it in plain English or plain French or whatever. But for my books, I have so much knowledge, and I try to use plain English words, but not lose the details, because the details is what makes it crispy.
Yes.
So you need to keep the details, but just like break the message so that people understand it. It's basically in my introduction, and this explains why so many publishers are like, okay. But in my introduction, I quote Peppa Pig, because she lands, the little pig for kids.
Yeah. The
She
pig, yes.
she lands on the moon with her father, and she asks him, why am I flying? And then he's like, he's an engineer, and he says, oh, it's very easy. It's gravity. And then he gives the the equation for gravity, and Peppa is like, hey, so it's magic. You're like, yeah. So you need to translate it in plain English so that people understand. And
I often see people when they try to present a complex message or system, they make use of metaphors. Would you use metaphors as well?
Not too much, but it's a good thing. It's a good way. Yeah, I try to really explain it without metaphors, but some people do, and it's very useful. Yes.
Yeah, because in the world we live in, and also the people who watch this program, most of them are starting their career and want to know how other people, you could say, have experienced their background. And so your advice is when you have to deal with a complex system, just see if you can translate it into a plain language. Is it just taking away the jargon? Is that what it's about?
It's like really if you're trying to explain something to a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And as long as the 4-year-old doesn't understand, then you need to work harder. It's basically this. Yeah.
Okay, and you have to meet somewhere in the middle. So one person needs to translate it to the 4-year-old. At a certain point, you can say, well, to the 4-year-old, no, sorry, you have to educate yourself because I have simplified it as much as I can, but I cannot. So where's the burden of being able to have a mutual understanding, in your view? Is like, can the 4-year-old remain 4 years old and you have to dumb it down until you've reached it on the level a 4-year-old can understand it? Or is there a certain point where I say, well, sorry, this is a discussion where you need a particular ground level, otherwise you shouldn't be
You
part.
never need any ground level.
Okay.
The communicator is supposed to be able to communicate the message. But so this is for books, but when it comes to big global projects, often the financier, policymakers, they have a very powerful brain, and they're able to understand what we tell them. We just need to tell them in the way that they lend ear to. So they're able to understand. We don't need to dumb it down. We just need to make sure that they think it's interesting for them. It meets their goals.
Yeah.
And
in environment you described there, I can understand. I'm thinking of scenarios translating your experience to when a government needs to educate society, or when a company needs to talk about, hey, this is why we're doing this.
Nudging.
Yeah.
Nudging is really good.
Yeah.
Nudging.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please explain the audience what's nudging.
Yeah. So I came across a very good example last week. I live in Africa. I've been living in Africa for many years, and the traffic is the most horrible you've ever seen anywhere, or maybe somewhere is even worse. It's India, and the Mumbai police did something a few years ago. There was so much honking, so much pollution, so much noise that people got like a very high level of stress. And whenever they were waiting for the traffic light to turn to green, well, they would honk, and everybody would honk. And the Mumbai police decided they had enough, and they installed a system that records the amount of noise. So a decibel checker, I don't know how you call this. And whenever it reaches 85 decibels, then the traffic light, which was red, turns to red again for 90 other seconds. And then their idea was, feel free to honk as long as you don't mind waiting. And that's because otherwise they would have tried and push like the message like, this is bad for you, you need to stop honking, and they would have, so you need to make it clear so that the people want to listen to you. And now that was the best way that the audience wanted to listen to them and stop honking.
That's a real life prisoner's dilemma, because if you really want to make a nuisance of yourself, you just keep on honking as an individual. So if you have nothing else to do. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why they do this. I don't know.
But but that works. Okay, that's a good example.
It works.
Okay, great. Hey, now we open with, I would say one of the key milestones in your life.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but how does that compare to other events? Can you still recognize other events as a key milestone?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely, and thank you for asking. um, yes, because I present myself as a plane crash survivor because people love stories,
Yes.
and it's a good story, right? And I get so many connection with wonderful people who want to know more, and then I end up learning about their life, which is most of the time a lot very very more awesome than mine. But I went through two things that were way more difficult to go through than a plane crash. So I lost my dad when I was 11, and that was very, very hard, as you can imagine. And I know many of us went through this at different periods of their lives. Even like if you're 60, you lose your mom, it's still very difficult. And you have to reorganize your life in a different way. And I went through, when I was 26, I went through mental harassment, moral harassment at work. And that really destroyed me. Like really, I had to start over from scratch after that. I'm very thankful for my husband. We had just met. It's been 4 months together, and after 2 months, he told me, "You haven't smiled in 2 months." And as you can see, I'm a very smiley person. So can you imagine me not smiling for 2 months? And then I realized there was a big problem with the person who was harassing me. And so I took, I would not eat, I would not sleep. I was really like, I was always like this. And then I spoke to a lady who told me, Alix, I haven't been working for the past 15 years. And I was like, really? I didn't realize. And then she said she had been mentally harassed, and it actually hit her nervous system. And now she medically is not allowed to work because it has such a bad impact on her. And she said it's a moral harassment who did this to her. So I decided to fight. And every day I was going to the lawyer, the medicine workers, I don't know, how do you call this? Work medicine, the one who can tell if you're in a bad shape or not, and physio, psychologist, psychiatrist, everything to make sure I will get out of this big muddy sand puddle. It was a hard job, but I think two things. I realized two things about me during that period. The doctor I saw at the work medicine, she told me that everything I had done before was not meant for me. So I had done like comparative law and things where I was supposed to work in an office, and she said, get away from this. So it's not for you.
Yeah.
And the problem is when your brain works very well, you're attracted to many things and you're good at many things. And that's actually a danger because you don't know what you really like. So she told me, you will be a perfect forest engineer. And I laughed so hard. And then she said, like, you might be also a neurodivergent. And I laughed so hard as well. And because I didn't even know what that meant. So I went to the library as a good neurodivergent person, read all the books about what it means to be neurodivergent, and then all the books about forestry environment. And she was right. Oh goodness, she was right. So for me, this was the really where my life flipped, and I'm very happy it happened so early in my life, in my work life,
Yeah. And
really,
I
and not at
assume
the end.
did you ever thank her for that?
The
Yeah.
I lost. I thank her when I was there, but then I lost track. She was in New Caledonia, so deep down near Australia. But for many years, I thought the person who harassed me was the worst thing that happened to me, and now I thank her because I know she's the best thing that happened to me, because I know who I am and I know what I like to do now.
So, thank you for sharing that open and honest story, by the way. Um, I'm debating a bit. No, I'm just going to leave that as is because there's some other things I want to talk to you about. Based on your story, I'm making some assumptions, but I'm going to ask you anyway. But what inspires you? Where where do you get your inspiration from? People, books, knowledge. How does that look like?
It's exact. This morning, I went to my kids' school, and I told them the first question that authors get asked is, "Where do you get your inspiration from?" And yeah, books.
Books.
You read lots of books and stories. Basically anything. Like anything can be an inspiration. Um, yeah, anything. And books, it's really for example, there was a literary agent when we were trying to push forward my energy book, who told me, I spoke to some publisher and all what they really want to read is your crash story. And I was like, no, I
Mhm.
don't want to speak about this. I don't want to write a book about me or the story. This is not an interesting story, you know? And she was like, suit you, but that's really what you should write. So I let it go, and for 1 year I didn't do anything. Then like she pushed again, so I wrote it. It was the most terrible book you've ever read. It was terrible, really. Um, and so of course nobody wanted to read it because it was, you could see I hated writing it. And then I wrote some books, some nonfiction books about it was a choral novel. I think it's about trees, but I don't know the title in English. uh, in French it's L'arbre monde, and it's choral
Yeah.
novel. So I said, okay, here I hold something. I could write my story from the point of view of other people, like for example the CEO of the company, or the Mongolian who saw me arriving on their step and was saying like, who's that girl, like really. And then I had a story, and then I grew up like more insight from other books, from movies, because movies are really good at telling you the cliffhangers. Like for example, the one best theory for cliffhangers is Desperate Housewife.
Yeah.
And you end and you're like, but what's going to happen? So you learn from anything, really.
Hey, hey, I'm just losing track of time, but I have to unfortunately get back down to earth again. But what you have shared with me, at least, Alec, that's my takeaway, that although somebody experiences quite significant events in life, which is a milestone, like in your case, plane crash, it doesn't identify you, it doesn't absorb you, it just
It builds.
it happened, but you can move on. As I look at, I'm just going to give it a place, but it doesn't define me as a whole. That's my take on what you have shared with us. Would you agree with
No, I think it helps you build the person you want to
me? Yeah,
become.
yeah,
And if, for example, so I post every day on LinkedIn, and I make it very important that I don't share anything negative.
yeah,
And in climate world, in the climate change world, it's very difficult to not speak about anything negative. But for me, it's very important that we think about the positive and the beautiful things we have in life and how lucky we are. As an astronaut recently said, we are so lucky to have this beautiful planet that is the exception, and we need to enjoy it and live it. And if some things made me stronger or made me realize it, then actually they're part of me. They don't define me, but they built me.
Got that. So, last question for you. How do you want the world to remember you?
Oh, if my kids remember me, that will be and my husband and my mom and my brother, that would be very, very good. But if I can write books where people understand the world better and it makes them want to protect it, then it would be perfect.
Alix, thank you so much for sharing your life lessons with us. Thank you so much.
Now, you've been a wonderful conversation leader. Thank you so much, Fritz. It was a pleasure being with you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.